This is the I Read Comic Books podcast. I am your host, Mike Rappin. With me this week, two just absolutely fantastic people. Kara Shamborski.
Hey.
And Kate Scotchless.
Hello.
Kate is back. There have been people literally sending me pigeons, letters, text messages. Someone got a hold of my actual phone number, sent me a message, said, "Where's Kate?" And I said, "You guys, I'm trying." She's very, very deep in the studies of the arcane magics known as computer science, but she will be back. And this week she's back.
Woo!
Yes.
Thank
I hope
God.
everyone's excited.
It's been a semester, folks.
Yeah.
Oof.
I believe it. And, you know, this is the last full episode of the year, so we got to make it the best one that we possibly can because, you know, honestly, the next two episodes of this year are really great. Nick and I did a mini-sode, Kara and Paul did a mini-sode, but this is the last, like, quote-unquote, full episode of the year. So we're going to make it the best show that we possibly can. And to do that, I'm going to ask the question I ask every single week, and I know I haven't asked the two of you in quite a while. How have you been? How have comic books been? Let's start with Kara.
This is the first time my voice has worked in 4.5 days because I was once again blessed with laryngitis.
Oh, no.
And when I told my coworkers that I had it, they're like, well, okay, well, like by telling, I mean like writing them little Post-it notes. And they're like, oh, well, I hope that you're relaxing this weekend and that you feel better. I'm like, I hope so too, because I'm recording a podcast and one of my friends just looked at me for a second and then very slowly she said, the one media that is totally audio.
Yeah, if this were a video show, we would just have your
I would just
wonderful
mime.
facial expressions. Yeah, exactly.
I was told that it's okay that I lost my voice because I have very eloquent expressions. I would never be a good poker player because you know exactly what I'm thinking. Like, even when I think I've got it all on lockdown, people are like, "Are you okay?" And I'm like, like don't I have it? Don't I like basically only if I'm wearing like enormous sunglasses can I hide what's going on? So know that if you ever see me with enormous sunglasses and it's not super sunny out, it's because mentally my brain's going, "Shields up, Captain."
Oh, because you're doing something super nefarious. That's what it is.
Anyway, so I saved my voice for this show. I was adamant about being on this show. I was like, this is the only time I've been on this month. God damn it, I'm going to be there. And of course, I couldn't miss Kate's reintroduction. And, you know, I have to know, Kate, since you're paying all this money to get educated at a higher level, what is a nugget of wisdom you can share with us from your learnings this semester?
My big nugget of collegiate wisdom is don't pay for it yourself. Because I don't pay for it myself and it makes all the suffering better.
Okay,
that
fair.
just makes everything worse.
Right.
All right, life advice from Kate Scotchless. Don't pay for it.
Get scholarships. Get learnt.
Yeah, the problem with that, though, is you got to keep doing well and maintain a full course load to keep that money flowing. And
But let's be honest,
that's
Kate,
where the suffering lives.
You're doing well, though. You're doing well. You're keeping up those grades for them scholarships, right?
Grades aren't in yet for this semester, Mike. Don't jinx me.
You got this. We're not jinxing you. Only good vibes. Only good vibes. Okay, so I will talk about comics. I just needed to get some free wisdom there.
That's fine.
So I am reading, I'm almost done reading Sledgehammer 44, which is Mike Mignola's like World War II jam that he did a couple years ago, I guess.
Okay. Yeah.
It's Mike Mignola, John Arcudi, artist Jason Latour, Lawrence Campbell, colorist Dave Stewart, cover artist Mike Mignola. A few years ago, I went deep on the Mignolaverse. I read every freaking Hellboy book that was out. I read all of BPRD. I read Witch Hunter.
Whoa.
I read Abe Sapien. If it was out, I read it. And then I stopped for like 3 years, like right around the time Hellboy and Hell came out. I just kind of stopped reading because basically I was reading whatever the library had. So if it was new, I wasn't reading it. I was going back matter. And then I just kind of stopped following that verse for a while, but it was always one of my favorite properties. I just didn't revisit it for whatever reason, but also slowly I'm still collecting the library editions because they're so beautiful. They're so beautiful. But I hadn't read Sledgehammer 44. And Nick actually told me to read it because he was like, you like World War II, you should read this thing. And I was like, yes, go on. So
yeah, Nick's been doing a big deep dive on the Hellboy universe as well, so I'm sure you guys have exchanged quite a bit of discussion about that.
Well, it's just, so first of all, Magnolaverse, yes, and second of all, World War II, yes, and I don't know how I didn't know about this, but it's like everything that I love in one book. It's basically... Like, the thing that I like about the Magnolaverse is that it's all this, like, deep, dark, mystic shit happening, and the protagonist always punches it. Like, it's not like a sorcerer versus sorcerer thing. It's always,
right.
like, the protagonist is going to have, like, some kind of, like, short, quippy thing that Han Solo would say, and then just punches the thing. And that's it. It's just such... an amusing dichotomy to me. So that very much continues in Sledgehammer 44. It's World War II, but there is this suit of armor that the Allies have created that is like top secret, and you start seeing it through like backup missions from Allied soldiers. And our story kind of gears up when the man piloting this suit dies, but because this suit is powered by this mystical life force thing, he when he dies, he has like an interaction with a soldier near him who is like also on the brink of death, and they do this weird like merge thing where the soul of the dying man merges and fuses with the armor and the life force thing, so everyone still thinks there's a dude inside the armor, but it's really the armor embodied now by the soul of this man who should have died, but instead got fused to this thing. And
that is pure mystic shit. I love it.
So fucking cool. And then the suit of armor like goes on to fight this like flaming black skull mystic Nazi dude in the middle of the sky in the middle of a thunderstorm, and I'm like, somebody make this shit into a movie right the fuck now. Like, why are you remaking Hellboy again when you could be doing this? Like, what is your problem? There's a Nazi war in the sky happening right now. So it's good is my bottom line on this. I still have a few more pages to go, but the collected version is quite long. It's like 140 or 180 pages, something like that.
Okay.
So I'm almost finished, but as you can see, I'm like into it. I'm hyped.
That's awesome. You're selling me on it. This sounds like a really cool thing that I should check out. Just
It's
like
so
all
cool.
the Hellboy universe, though.
It's so cool, Mike.
Well, Kate, welcome back.
Thank
Very
you.
excited to have you here.
Thank you.
How have you been? How have comic books been? I mean, could you just sum up the last few months very quickly and then tell us about comics?
So the reason I've been MIA is because I had a really exciting semester where I was doing my graduate project, which is like the kind of capstone event of my thing. Even though it's a semester early, I don't actually graduate until next April. But I got permission to do that early, so I was working on that research, and then also working as a research assistant and working as a intern and doing full-time classes. And I have not read comics for like a semester. So my first dip back in was reading the book of the month for this month to talk about today, which was a fantastic reintroduction. It was like, oh yeah, this is why I love and miss comics.
Yeah.
But other than that, Xander, who's usually so heroic and amazing, shared his germs with me. And so he and I have spent this weekend post-exams vegging on the sofa, eating popsicles and moaning. And so I've been watching comics material instead of reading it, because other than the book of the month, because my brain is that good old-fashioned like sludge, that cotton ball event. I took a lot of Sudafed for this episode.
Gotcha.
Okay.
Listen, I'm good to go for like 2 hours.
Thank you for
making this happen.
Thank you for suffering.
So I watched I Kill Giants, which has been on my list for forever, because didn't they announce that they were going to make that movie like years ago and then just didn't for forever?
It's been on the slate for a long time, and then it finally happened like this past year, was it?
Yeah.
Yeah, and I mean, what did you think?
Oh, so I Kill Giants is probably my all-time favorite graphic novel. Well, collected edition, whatever. And So it's a very different experience watching the movie. And I felt like I didn't relate to the character as much on screen when it's not being told from her perspective like it is in the comic. And so she wasn't quite as immediately likable and relatable. And then the overall emotional impact, I think as a result, was less for me, where with the comic, I ugly cried. I mean, ugly cried. And then with the movie, not a drop. So that was the real clincher for me. It was at the end when I was dry-eyed. I was like, well, I don't know that it had the same effect. That being said, I already knew what was going to happen. But I've reread I Kill Giants and had the same experience. So I don't know. Mm-hmm. I liked it. It was worth a watch. I can see why it didn't get amazing reviews from people who weren't already invested in the series. And then we also started watching Sabrina, which I wanted to watch in October, but of course had no time for. Mm-hmm. And that's like, it's getting creepier than my usual creep level tolerance.
Yeah. I just finished up the whole season. I think you said you were a few episodes in?
Like 3 episodes, yeah.
Okay.
And I did read volume 1 of The Chilling Adventures, so.
Okay. I mean, the spook levels only get higher.
Perfect.
I'll say that. But I think they, I won't say anything else. The spook levels get a little bit higher, but it's ultimately super worth watching the rest of it if you can put yourself through a couple spooks and scares here and there.
I mean, the spiders, Mike. The spiders.
Oh, that's only 1 episode. Don't worry.
Oh my God, it was bad.
Kara, you also watched all this because you wrote like a big thesis piece on this, right?
Yeah. So I actually just watched the Sabrina holiday special last night, and that was good, and that made me feel like maybe Sabrina would function better. I'm going to make this as spoiler-free as possible because I know Kate hasn't seen the whole thing, but I feel like the show would function better as a Monster of the Week thing, which is kind of what they did with the holiday special, whereas the first season just structurally felt like it dragged because it was just like watching one long movie. And I know there were like a couple Monster of the Week episodes, and I kind of want them to just do that for a season or 2 and see what happens now that I've seen the format of the holiday special and really enjoyed that.
It did have the feel to me like other Netflix shows that are basically 10-hour movies.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And when is this show? I know it's supposed to be like mid-60s, but in the holiday episode, they made references to The Grinch, which did come out in the mid-60s as a TV special and earlier as a book. So I'm like, cool, but was The Grinch like the recognizable cultural icon that it is now at that time? And then they also made an Elf on the Shelf reference, and I'm like 90% sure Elf on the Shelf is a contemporary phenomenon.
The cousin also has a laptop in one of the first episodes.
Yeah, they're not very specific about the time because that's what I was saying to Kelly, because Kelly and I were watching it, and I was like, oh yeah, this is going to take place in like the 60s, and then someone whips out a laptop, and I was like, wait, what?
Yeah, but didn't I feel like they specifically said this took place in the mid 60s, which is why when they were like, yeah, we're going to have a Riverdale crossover, I was like, how?
Yeah. Questions to be answered in season 2, I guess.
God, so many questions.
Well, okay, are you enjoying Sabrina outside of the spooks and scares?
Yes. So after the spooks and scares, when it got too close to bedtime, then we had to switch to doing Charmed, which is significantly less nightmare-inducing. The 90s nostalgia is strong.
Cool. Well, I'm glad that you've had some, relaxation time since exams, because it's only going to kick back into high gear in January, right?
Yeah, but, it should be slightly less brutal because my master's project is done. Right.
Well, that's good. I'm glad you got to consume something that was good, and you've got a couple weeks until then. So as for me, I read a whole bunch of stuff. I've been trying to just get rid of a bunch of backlog things that I've got. So I started in reading Southern Bastards. I read Southern Bastards Volume 1. This is from Jason Aaron and Jason Latour. And the way that I describe this book is it's a book that doesn't just take place in the South, but it's a story from the South. Like, it's really harsh, it's really rough and gritty, and it doesn't feel like this is a story that just happens to take place in the South. It feels like it belongs in the South, and really only people who live in the South truly understand it. And I don't know, this is a book that's been out for a long time, and I've just been putting off reading it, but I'm really glad that I sat down to read it because it was very good. I liked it. I liked how brutal it was. I liked how in your face they were about like real life subjects without being like spending too much time on like, oh, this is, everyone down here is racist. Like, that's not like the focus of it. The focus is that people in the South can be really shitty sometimes, and sometimes you have a legacy that you need to hold up for the only reason being your pride. I don't know. It's a really weird book for 4 issues. It was very weird.
The thing that I think hits me the most about that book is it's so atmospheric. And I don't know about you, Mike, but when I read it, I just feel that this like sticky humidity that must be infusing this whole town. Like, that's just the feeling I get. It's one of the books that creates kind of a visceral atmospheric draw, at least for me.
Yeah, and I think the credit for that goes to like the really subtle color work that they do. There's a lot of red in this book, but like a lot of different shades of red. That kind of actually reminds me of what was also done in the book about witches that I cannot think of right now, and not witches,
not
Redlands.
witches.
Redlands is what I'm thinking of. The Jordi Belair book, where they did a lot with like using the same or different shades of the same color to try to depict like the weight of something in a scene. And I definitely think Southern Bastards did that. And man, it's solid. I'm ready to read the rest of it. It's queued up essentially for me. But I also read Coming to Me #4. This is from Zach Thompson and Lonnie Nadler on writing, with Peter Kowalski on art. And if you haven't been reading this book, this is the final issue. It's only a 4-issue miniseries. The story is essentially taking the body horror, weird, mind-melding consciousness acid trip to the next level, and in this final issue. And boy, oh boy, what an ending it was. I don't want to spoil it. I really think people should definitely go read it. And I think this might be my favorite comic from 2018. Like, I definitely think this is one of the best constructed comics I've read in a while. Black Mask is fucking killing it this year. I'll just say that. And this is one of their top tier books. I'll just say that. I mean, man, what a crazy psychedelic ending they had to Come Into Me #4. I really enjoyed it. So if you're into that kind of nasty, crazy, trippy body horror stuff, this is the book for you.
Did you read Intersect by Ray Fox?
I actually didn't. I haven't read that yet.
I wonder how it compares to that.
Maybe I'll have to do like a compare and contrast on this.
Yeah.
I'll force Tia to do a book versus book episode with me, where she'll recommend that one. I'll recommend Coming to Me, and we can dissect the book.
You can't plan her choice, Mike. That's not the point of book versus book.
Okay, that's true. That's true. Well, anyways, I'll get into. You'll find out what book versus book is actually in the next 2 weeks. We're doing a whole episode about that, so you'll hear about it. So let's move on and talk about comics that are coming out very soon. Comic books are dropping on December 19th, 2018. What are you both excited for this week? Let's start with Kate.
I'm excited for Super Sons Omnibus that's coming out. So my shop says it's coming out on the 19th, and Amazon says it's coming out on the 24th. But regardless, this is the complete collected Super Sons by Peter Tomasi and Jorge Jimenez. Paul always nails that pronunciation, and I don't. But so it's Superboy and Robin, Damian Wayne's Robin, and collects all of the Super Sons title issues, but also all of the issues that were crossovers or annuals. So like Superman 10 and 11 and Teen Titans number 15, the DC Rebirth Holiday Special #1. It is the perfect thing for those like me that fell off early on and want to read it all now that it's done. I, when I decided to do grad school, had to cancel my pull list at my shop and have just been reading, sale digital comics or stuff from the library or nothing at all when I'm way too busy. But this was one of those things that I had to stop pulling regularly, and so I was really, really ready for this collected edition to come out. It looks beautiful.
Gotcha. I've been slowly tracking that book, and I didn't realize there was some crossover stuff. So maybe I'll grab this omnibus just to say I've got it all in one book, so I don't have to go tracking down the individual issues of those.
Didn't realize there's crossover stuff. It's DC. Of course there's crossover stuff.
I don't know. I'm just saying.
Wait, quick question. So this is all the new Super Sons stuff? Like not the stuff from, when was it? Did they do this in the 70s? I feel like this is a 70s joint.
Yeah, they did it. There was an older edition of Super Sons. This is the most recent run.
Yeah,
okay.
This is the one that started like a year or two ago.
Oh, okay. So it's all the new stuff.
All the new stuff, which then the Super Sons got canceled, and so now it's the complete, all that there will ever be until they give us another Super Sons.
Just wait until the next DC reboot.
Exactly.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay. I do like the concept of like Batman and Superman grow up and have sons that have friends or frenemies or whatever it is in the iterations that they're in. It's a cute idea. I think it was back from when DC was like, I guess we should be like domestic and stuff. And they can like grow up and have families, but then they realize, no, the money is in them being brooding and single.
Right. Well, the money, I don't know. Fans seem to want them to be married, and then they're like, well, we're just going to have Catwoman run away.
No, no, not Selena. Leave her alone. Just let her be happy.
Exactly. Well, Kara, what about you? What are you excited for this upcoming week?
Shocking no one, I'm going to pick an Archie title. There's a new Betty and Veronica series coming out. And so, okay, I don't know if you guys remember, but a few years ago, Archie made the kind of interesting / weird move of trying to kickstart their new line. Like, they had a Kickstarter that they canceled a couple weeks in, and it was supposed to fund Jughead, Betty and Veronica, and I think Archie.
Yeah.
And
I was a part of that. I was really bummed when they canceled it.
Right. It was like kind of on the heels of the successful Fantagraphics Kickstarter. So my guess is they saw that and thought, oh, well, we can just do that. But it was different because Fantagraphics was like about to go out of business, and Archie was just like, well, we don't have the money to do this right now.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
But if you give us the money, then we can do it right now. So it was just like weird messaging. So I don't think it caught hold like Fantagraphics did. But so when they were doing that, even though they canceled the Kickstarter, they eventually did roll those books out. And the Betty and Veronica miniseries that they were doing with that was drawn by Adam Hughes. And I just kept thinking, why? Like, they're teenagers. Why are you giving them essentially to this pinup artist who's going to like sexualize them? And they tried to do like some self-aware sexualization jokes, but they fell really flat because you can't say you recognize that what you're doing is weird, but still keep doing it. Like, that doesn't make it okay. So I just like, I read it, but I was just kind of like, And so with this series, they are, they're going with looks like an all-female creative team. Jamie Rotante, Sandra Lanz, and Kelly Fitzpatrick. Jamie Rotante did the Betty and Veronica Vixens series, which was reimagining the girls as being part of a biker gang.
Oh, yeah.
And she was actually she was at Archie Comics at the brief time that I was there, and she was always a total sweetheart. So every time I see her name on something, I'm like, yeah, support.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm excited for Betty and Veronica. It's their senior year, so anything could happen.
Oh my god.
Oh my god.
Get out.
Can we please just get Kara to read all of the like synopses for upcoming issues of Archie Comics, because that's fantastic.
Call me Archie. Oh my god.
So this is almost enough to convince me. If you're saying that the creative team sounds solid to you, I'm going to trust you as our resident Archie expert. So
I trust Jamie.
Who knows? Yeah, that sounds great. This week I'm excited for Deep Roots number 5. This is from Vault Comics. This is Dan Waters and Val Rodriguez on art, Dan Waters on writing. This book is super trippy, and I'm apparently really into this kind of stuff. The art is out of this world with colors and just bright flashes of light and everything. The way that I described it is, this is a trippy book, and I like that a lot. What is time? What is space? How does the universe protect itself? After 4 issues of abstract everything, we're finally coming to a conclusion, I think. I know that this is the last issue, But the way that the story's been building, I feel like it's going to end with a really strong cliffhanger. I don't know if there's more story to be told, but there is something to be said about like mind-bending stories that end with an abstract ending that kind of make you just think, versus this is how we wrapped everything up with a nice bow. And I think that the way that Deep Roots has developed itself as a story definitely lends to that kind of ending. So I'm really excited just to read through the rest of this book. And honestly, I think I'm going to do a full reread before I read the last issue, because there's kind of a lot of threads to bring together for this last issue, and I'm not sure that I fully have them all grasped. I'll be completely honest. But on the whole, I've very much been liking this. Kind of reminds me of what Warren Ellis was doing with Trees in a weird way, but in a bigger sense. There's a lot of dimension hopping, multiple character perspectives, and there is this weird forest knight with a big old sword that is somehow relevant to everything. And I think it's going to finally come to fruition as to what he's actually doing in the story. And again, maybe I missed it and I know what he's doing, but I just am not able to keep track of the threads. Nonetheless, I'm liking this book quite a bit. I'm always willing to try Vault Comics books because they're doing really out there stuff, and I really enjoy that. I don't know if either of you have been reading Vault books, but they've been doing some cool stuff. I mean, this is where Heathen's at. This is a couple of other books out there too.
What other comics are they putting out?
They just put out a book called Fearscape. Tia did a review for us very recently about that. And if I pull up their site, I know I'm not supposed to use my computer, but they did Submerged, Vagrant Queen, Friendo, Wasted Space, Reactor, Deep Roots is on the list. And they've done a bunch of other stuff too, but they've got some pretty interesting out there comics. I know Fearscape is getting a lot of really good reviews. Friendo is supposedly like the book to read right now, and I haven't checked it out yet. As far as like these, indie books are considered. But yeah, they've been doing some really good stuff. The Vault guys are very, very nice. Tia always recommends them whenever, they're brought up in conversation. So yeah, Deep Roots, definitely give that book a shot if you want something that's kind of out there.
Okay, definitely.
For our show this week, it is a Goodreads Book of the Month book, and we're discussing 4 Kids Walk Into a Bank. But before we get into the discussion, I want to remind everyone that we have a listener survey going on right now. You can win $15 to Comixology if you go to ircbpodcast.com/survey. Fill out the survey, let us know what you think of the show. Give us some information about what you like, what you don't like. We'd love to hear from you, and we'll put you in the raffle to win $15. But let's talk about 4 Kids Walk Into a Bank. The Goodreads folks, the fantastic people over at Goodreads in our group, voted, and this is the winner for this month. 4 Kids Walk Into a Bank by Tyler Boss, Matt Rosenberg, and Thomas Maurer. This book was fantastic. I'm super biased. I love this book to death. So Kate, Kara, I want to hear what you guys thought of this book before I just go into a huge love fest.
I'm here for the love fest.
I got a combination of Plutona and Hawkeye vibes reading this.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, like a lot of like that vibe of art and atmosphere and kids being awesome in their punk ways. A little bit of Paper Girls in here too, in terms of tone, and I don't know. I just in my head, all of those art styles and color palettes are all in the same kind of vein.
Definitely.
Yeah, I haven't read Plutona, but I want to, especially if you're telling me that it's along these same lines of...
Add it to your list.
Perfect.
Yeah,
okay.
yeah.
Done.
Everything about this, I'm glad that I read this in book form, because there were a lot of interesting layouts and double page spreads that I appreciated just having large in front of me. I got lost on this one spread that was... one of the characters' progressions through the police computer system, but I'm getting ahead of myself.
Actually, it's a full spoiler episode, by the way. I never remember ever in my entire life to remind people full spoilers, but we are going full spoilers on this book, and I know exactly what you're talking about. I almost screenshotted like every cool diagram from this book and put it in our show notes, just because Tyler Boss is the man, and his work is in-fucking-credible. I love it so much.
So the premise of this book is pretty simple. It kind of says it in the title. It's 4 kids walk into the bank. It's these 4 kids around the age of like 10 and 11 who discover that one of their dads is involved in a impending bank heist, so they decide to rob the bank first so the dad can't get in trouble. Classic kid shenanigans.
Right. Yeah, classic.
Well, and see, that was one of the things that I thought was so clever is like, if you had introduced that premise in the first issue, I would have been like, that's completely unbelievable. That just makes no sense. But by the point that they did, you're like a third of the way through the series, and we'd already seen Paige get arrested for breaking a kid's nose, and we watched her set a man and his house on fire, both when there were other solutions available. And so by the time that she's like, yeah, obviously we have to rob the bank first, you're like, this is the exact kind of thing she'd come up with.
Definitely. Well, what's interesting about this is that we've got 4 main characters: Paige, Stretch, Berger, and Walter. And Paige is kind of our main character, with Stretch, Berger, and Walter kind of being side characters, but they all form a group to do shenanigans. And of course, this comic opens on a D&D game, so I was immediately hooked. And each subsequent issue, at least the first couple of issues, open on them playing some sort of game. And it keeps reminding you, like, these are kids. This is what they do. They also happen to get into high-stakes shenanigans that involve robbing a candy store, or in the case of this book, robbing a fucking bank. And it just goes to show, like, Paige as a character is so much more mature than maybe the rest of the people that she's around, even more mature than her father in some ways, but she's also got like this weird childhood innocence where she's always kind of relating it back to a game, like all games have strategies and this is just how you win. And that kind of seems to be her character throughout. At least that's what I took away from it.
Well, yeah, and I mean that what you just said about all the issues open with a game to remind you that they're kids, it kind of makes you wonder, did they sort of view the heist as a game also? And I think yes, because, full spoilers, the book kind of ends with the cops like chasing down these kids, and they're like, their argument is we're just kids, but then you see Paige ends up in prison anyway. So it's like maybe they didn't fully realize, like I think they did to some extent, but I think a huge part of it was a game. It was like,
right.
we can do this. We can totally do this.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was the impression that I got. That was that kind of childhood naivete of, and that was the point of starting each issue with a different game, like video games and whatnot, because you're seeing them all constantly interacting in games, and then basically taking that to the outside world and trying to get the same results, I guess. I don't know.
Well, it seems like the fallback for them is like, we can try anything,
right?
Because we're just kids, and nothing's really going to happen to us because we're just kids,
right? And
then at the end of the story, like that's absolutely not the case. But even throughout the beginning issues, like the first 5 or few issues, they do all of these like kind of high stakes things, like breaking into a house or putting together like a chemical compound that makes someone tell the truth. Like they're doing these things in like kind of a wacky Goonies way. But by the end, you're kind of expecting the same outcome where like at the end of the heist or whatever that happens, no real consequences befall them. Even though, yes, Paige did go to jail, but that's played off as like a joke. Like her uncle shows up and she says,
that was my question.
Whoa.
Did he die, or did he just kind of fall out with the gang because he was like, no, I was shot. You guys are shitty friends. Goodbye.
Oh, I took away from the end of that he died.
Yeah.
Yeah, like I think that was even though at the end everyone's smiling, it seems like I think that was the consequence that she needed to see, as harsh as it was, that like your actions have severe consequences, especially when they're at the level at which you're playing at.
Yeah, I thought it was interesting that in the games you're frequently seeing one of the kids dying in game, right? That their character dies and is going to get regenerated or something. And that then the comic is ending with one of them dying for real, and this is actually real. You don't get to come back from this. It's not a game.
But on the other hand, I don't know if the other 2 boys would have still been there for her when she got out if he died.
Oh, that's a good point.
Yeah.
Like, would they still like be there and want to be her friend if he'd been shot, or did he die? But it's been a long enough time where they have forgiven her and forgiven themselves a little bit. Like, I really like the ambiguity of that.
Yeah, and I think the ambiguity is what's really going to drives the conversation about this book. Is at the end of the day, like, you don't necessarily think that this is Paige's fault. At least I didn't think it was Paige's fault. Like, yes, she put together the heist, but the actual thing where Berger gets shot, like, that was kind of Berger's fault. Like, he jumped on that cop. Like, everything kind of happens in like a really quick succession where you can't really say it's the cop's fault. You can't really say that it's Berger's fault. You can't really say that it's Paige's fault. Like, all of these things are really happenstance, but they're a consequence of poor planning,
right?
And them being kids.
Yeah, impulsivity.
Yeah, and Paige's whole spiel is they always get into a plan, and then they go, "What happens next?" And she goes, "I didn't think this far ahead," over and over and over.
Yeah,
but it's very like interesting to see that the first issue foreshadows the end of the book. Right, where Berger jumps on the back of the dragon. He's like, I didn't know you could do that.
Oh, I didn't even think of that.
And then at the end, that's exactly what he does. He's like, I can just get on the back of this thing and everything will be okay. But obviously not.
Yeah. I like that. Like, I really liked Berger. Like, he's so obnoxious.
Oh, my.
And, like, who among us didn't have a
kid.
Berger in their friend group growing up?
Oh, totally. I mean, that was the thing I took away is that these kids feel like stupid fucking kids.
Yeah, they're kids I knew. Yeah.
The part where Berger, like, they're like trying to make plans without him and he just bursts in. He's like, oh, it sounds like you guys are making a plan without me. Where are we meeting up? And I just was like, man, that like desperate need for inclusion coupled with absolutely no shame in inviting yourself along. Like,
Well,
I know so many people over the years who are like that.
Yeah. But I think the thing that I took away from that was that although he wasn't invited and Paige was trying to make these plans without him, she didn't necessarily like throw a fit that he was coming. She didn't say, no, you can't come, Berger. She's just like, oh my God, Berger's coming. And they constantly harp on you weren't even invited, but they never stop him from coming. They realize that, yes, he's still our friend, even though we kind of don't like him sometimes.
It's just a bunch of shitty friends all around.
Yeah, I mean, there's also that.
I really liked Walter, too.
Oh,
Walter.
Such a shy sweetie.
He's such a
Sweet
shy
baby
sweetie.
Walter.
I love the visual effect of his eyes getting big and shiny for all the times when he shines, like when he's talking about chemistry or math, and his eyes get all big. And I'm like, oh, yes.
But then coupled with the lettering choice of making all his dialogue minuscule.
So
to show
tiny.
how
Oh my
quietly
gosh.
he's talking.
Oh,
Lettering matters.
The part where he's on the microphone, he's trying to talk, or he's on the walkie-talkie, he's trying to talk to the cops, and they're like, did a mouse just speak? Oh, man. There was so many just choice little jokes throughout this. Like, there was a moment in, I think it was the second issue, maybe the third issue, where they're playing arcade games, and Berger borrowed a quarter from someone, and
the quarter debate.
Stretch is like, that was my quarter. And he's like, how do you recognize a quarter?
I have to say, so I was on the episode we did a while back about sound effects, and my stance was I never noticed them, but I noticed all the sound effects in this book because it was like, I think in the first issue, I think Walter vomits and they'd just been drinking soda and the sound effect is Fanta. And I like did a double take and I was like, wait, what the fuck? And then for the rest of the book, I made a point to pay attention to the sound effects because they were all so great. Like when Berger is evading the cops by like jumping on a trampoline over a barbed wire fence and the sound effect is fuck you.
I like the one where he's getting hit in the head by the kickball that the jocks threw and it just says jocks.
Yeah. The part where Berger is distracting the cops and he throws an egg and it hits the guy in the face and the sound effect is yolked. There's so many. I mean, this book is full of little fun details. And again, you got to credit Tyler Boss and Thomas Maurer. Thomas Maurer did the lettering for this book. The two of those guys working together to frame some of this stuff is unparalleled. Like, it's, again, I think Kara, you said this reminds you a lot of Hawkeye. And I feel a lot of that as well. Tyler Boss's line work and a lot of the way that he just does layouts feels very similar to David Aja. And like, that is totally like a credit to the both of them. They both do stupendous work. So again, if you're into that, definitely check out this book as that part.
Did you notice that when Paige is giving Walter the book to make the like sleeping gas from, it is Wartime Chemistry, a Beginner's Guide?
Oh my God, I did not notice that.
I did not see that.
That is very good.
I enjoyed that detail. And then the librarian comes up. She's like, that's for seniors only. I'm like, who the fuck is giving 18-year-olds wartime chemistry to read?
Right. See, but and that's like a kind of a commentary on when this book takes place, which feels like mid-'80s. Like, it just feels like an 80s comic.
Floppy disks. When are floppy disks?
Oh, that'd be late 80s then. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Solidly 90s, yeah.
Yeah, maybe early 90s. Yeah, there was a lot of just little things in this, like, moments between characters. There was, like, the couple pages where it was just back and forth, and it was just faces for, like, a 2-page spread. Like, talk about a cool way to have a conversation and minimize the amount of art that has to be drawn. That's also one way of doing that. But one of the dialogue pieces that really got me in this book was Paige's dad picks her up at school, and she'd been fighting, and she's like, why are you lashing out at these guys? And she says, he teased me about mom. And there's a beat, and he says, you should have fucking killed him. Like, he totally justifies Paige's rage because he knows that the death of her mom was probably the biggest and worst thing that's ever happened to her. And obviously, like, that response means that he feels the exact same way. Like, that loss is massive to the two of them.
Right.
Which explains a lot of Paige's acting out and kind of drives into this, backstory of Paige's dad where we don't really know too much about him, but we know that he made a lot of sacrifices in order to make sure that Paige had a decent life. And there's a lot of story that's not told that I took away from this on a second reread. This is the second or third time I've read this. Just around the two of them, like, their relationship is incredibly complex. I really appreciated that. Like, they didn't have to tell a lot of story for you to understand how strong their connection was.
Yeah, that he's willing to do just about anything to make sure that they can stay together and that he can provide for her.
Yeah. Yeah.
But at the same time, like, kids kind of internalize the voices of their parents usually when you have that impulse of, like, I could punch this guy in the face, they have that internalized voice of the parents going, like, or you could, say that you didn't like what he said or tell a teacher or whatever. Whereas we get that, I love when she's in the cupboard in the house hiding and there you get the devil on her shoulder, right? With the, like, you could stab him. And then the angel pops out and the angel's like, you're smart and resourceful, Paige. Light him on fire. And you're like, who are your parents?
Yeah. Well, that was Walter. That Walter was her little angel on her shoulder.
Oh, I didn't notice that. Was it really?
Yeah.
The more I think about her actions, though, the more I'm just kind of taken aback by how unbelievably reckless she is. Like, I was thinking again about the first issue where these, like, 30-something-year-old, like, bank robbers to be show up at Paige's house. And, like, I'm just thinking, okay, how would I, as an 11-year-old, have reacted to all of a sudden 4 strange, scary-looking dudes showing up in my house? I would have, like, freaked the fuck out, like, not said anything, like, started slowly backing away, like, maybe try to find a phone, going, like, Mom! Or something like that.
Right, and this, yelling for a parent.
And this little punk is just getting up in their faces, and her boy squad is backing her up by, like, shooting one of the dudes in the eye with a slingshot and an ogre figure. And I'm just like, this kid has zero self-preservation instincts. Like, how do you get to the point where you just don't give a fuck like this in the way that she does? Because every single thing she does and says in this book is just zero self-preservation, zero internalization of the consequences, just basically the opposite to me in every possible way. So the more I think about it, the more I'm just like, how? Like, are you okay?
Yeah, well, and to that end, I know some people have talked about that not feeling accurate. So Robert on the Goodreads discussion thread said something just felt off about it throughout the story. On the one hand, it seems to try to be a realistic story, no monsters, superpowers, fantasy, etc. But so much of what the kids do is so unrealistic, and he feels like he missed something. And I think that's kind of, it is so extreme that I could see where it might read as just completely unbelievable, especially if you didn't know any kids that were that level of impulsive and reckless.
Yeah, I mean, again, this part of me, like, reads into the context maybe too much, but I think, Paige's ability to just do things without thinking is kind of her like acting out in a way.
For sure.
Right? Like she's got this rough home life and that's made pretty apparent.
Yep.
You know, her dad's not making her lunch, things like that, which isn't necessarily it's one of the many signs that she doesn't have a good home life. And, you know, kids like that, to play into tropes and stereotypes, like tend to act out in a lot of weird ways. And so her doing that kind of stuff is maybe an excuse to say, like, you know, she has this bad home life, so she's acting out. But I think to Robert's point, there are some things that feel a little bit super fantastic, like not like anybody grows wings and flies away, but these kids get away with a lot. But it's in the same way that kids get away with a lot in like the Home Alone movies or the Goonies or something like that. You kind of add a little bit of movie magic to it, and then this story becomes a little bit more understandable. But I do understand his point about it being a super realistic story, but there just happens to be some kind of super elements to it where these kids are able to get away with a lot and plan a lot and know a lot of things, probably more so than like a normal or, you know, real life 10 or 11-year-old kid would probably know.
Yeah. Well, and like Walter's unsupervised in a chemistry lab at his school. Like that just doesn't happen. I think it felt very like Goonies to me in that sense, where it's like, yeah, this isn't real world, but it's just kind of a stretch. It's maybe how kids see the real world sometimes.
Sure.
I can do anything.
It's kind of like
the dream.
I know. It's kind of like in the Peanuts comics. Like you never actually see a grown up, and in the shows they're just going wah 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 wah. This is very like, unless the kids choose to interact with grown ups, they're kind of in their own world.
Yeah, they're very unsupervised.
Well, except for that one time that teacher came into, what was it, like the boys' bathroom when they were beating up Turd.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, Turd.
Or when he was beating them up. It's just that whole reveal of like his mom being the manager at the bank and having chosen to name him Turgel. Just
it's a family name.
And she just and Paige just like almost broke character for her infiltration. It was just like, what the fuck would you do that for?
Explains so much. It did feel very like coming of age in that sense too, with that whole trope of like realizing your parents aren't who you thought they were, and finding out more about your parents from like before you existed, and just not just your experience of them, in the same way that like Snowblind did, and gave me echoes of that, and that probably that same like realizing your dad was a criminal, but I think that's pretty classic.
And I think that some of the like the interactions with Paige and her dad seems like maybe she's a little bit too young for him to be treating her like an adult in some ways. Like he doesn't parent her very well. And not to say that parents should be controlling, but parents need to have some restraint on children, and that's what you typically see in real life. And I think that his like, hey, you're just one of my buds kind of thing, maybe it was to her detriment, right? Like she was given too much freedom, and therefore she was able to make a lot of mistakes that most kids wouldn't. Like having free reign to skip school or go to school and skip around and do whatever. Even when she gets in trouble, he kind of just shrugs it off. He's like, oh, you're grounded for forever, but he still lets her sneak out and hang out with her friends, constantly saying, hey, don't you know what grounded means? And they just move on from that.
Right.
Like she doesn't truly respect his authority. And I mean,
or
this
maybe have consequences.
And she doesn't see any consequences for her actions. And that's like the story behind the story that's not necessarily said directly to you, but that's what I read into it in a lot of ways.
Well, and you do mostly see you see the adults when she gets their attention by doing something like acting out, like her uncle or her dad. It's in response to something crazy she did.
Definitely. Yeah, so what did you get? So Berger, biggest shithead friend. I know we kind of already talked about him, but I just could not get over the fact of just how much he didn't seem to take anything seriously. And like that it ends up kind of being like the big crux at the end is that nobody taking anything as serious as it was. Like I felt Stretch and Walter were really like, I don't know if we should be doing this, and Berger's like, I'm just here for the ride. And Paige is just trying to save her dad in the only way that she apparently can come up with. Like it's I don't know, it's really interesting to see their friend dynamic kind of play out as the story goes through, and they all end up turning on her and then coming back in the end. And that's kind of one of those things that maybe despite everything, whether or not, you know, we could actually come to a decision of whether Berger died or not, like the end goal is that their friendship was bigger than the one single or handful of times that they fucked up together.
Yeah.
Like they were still good friends despite all of that.
Yeah, Kate mentioned on the Goodreads discussion, Kate from our podcast team, Kate, but not this Kate. The queen speaks of herself in third person. But she said she appreciated how all the characters and their relationships to one another were distinctly different, which I think is another interesting point about their friend group. It's like it's very cohesive, and yet all of their interactions with one another are distinct. And I like that.
Yeah, the way they talk to each other is, for the most part, pretty different.
Yeah.
Like, everyone treats Berger like a piece of shit, but like, that's understandable. But like, I think Paige has a lot of patience for Walter, or in some cases, or she trusts him to take on big tasks and be like, I know you're not going to fuck this up. I can leave you to do this very complicated thing. You know, I think there was like a weird hinted at budding relationship between Stretch and Paige, or maybe I read that wrong. So their interactions are kind of weird in some cases, where I think Stretch is realizing, oh, Paige is a girl, and I don't know how to deal with that.
That's the most 12-year-old thing ever.
Yeah, but that's really good. I think like their whole circle of friends is really interesting. It's very dynamic, and it gives a lot of life to the story.
It gives depth to the friendships too, because that is how a friend group is, you know. And Kate also pointed out that there's some non-traditional gender expressions in Paige and Walter that is refreshing, and that usually the, you know, reckless, aggressive rule breaker kid isn't a girl, and the ringleader, you know, is usually a guy. So I like that too. I found that appealing. Yeah. I liked how they used her hair to show how rough and tumble she is sometimes.
Oh my gosh.
So good.
I mean, there was a lot of panels that just showed so much like emotion. Like I screen capped one of them that like I said, this is the realest fucking panel in the comic. In our notes, I'll put it in the show notes somewhere somehow. But man, it like broke my heart to see Paige like breaking down.
Yeah, and the thing where they're like planning it with their childhood toys of like a My Little Pony as a bank customer, and like oh my god, that's the kiddest way to plan a bank robbery. Holy crap!
But then they were like, on top of that, they were arguing about why a horse would be in a bank,
right?
And I'm like, but
it's
but
not
like
a
you know
game.
that you're using these as avatars for people, so why are you arguing over the semantics of it being a horse?
Yeah.
And they were talking about, like, the bank tellers were Legos, and they're like, one of them's dead! What the hell is that?
One of them doesn't even have a face!
But that just kind of adds to, do they know that this is the real world, or is this still just a game?
Yeah,
Right.
I think that's more of a, like, they're still playing, they're still goofing, they're still, you know, being children. Mm-hmm. Even when it's about to hit the fan.
Yeah. I mean, I love this book. I just to say that. So I guess I don't know. Do you guys have any final thoughts about the book? I mean, we're kind of running out of tape, unless you guys had more you wanted to dive into in a specific bit of the book.
Yeah, I guess while I was reading it, I was wondering for most of the book how this related to your own experience of robbing a bank as a child, Mike.
Oh,
if you could share.
Okay, I said that to you in private.
Oh shit! I'm so sorry. Xander, cut that.
Yeah. What did you guys think of this book overall? Like, is this a book you'd recommend? You want to read again, or yeah, give me some of your overall thoughts.
I loved it. Rated 5-star on Goodreads. Immediately told Xander that he has to read the copy that I had borrowed from Kate for this episode before I give it back.
Okay.
Probably I'm going to buy my own copy once not all my money is going to textbooks, which are an outrageous racket. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I really, really liked it.
Cool. Kara, what about you?
Yeah, it's good. I really enjoyed it. I got totally swept up in the adventure, and I know I've said this before, I'll say it again. Sometimes I forget to look at art because my eye is naturally drawn to the words, but this one, like, I was taking my time to look at the panels and see what was going on. And a lot of that was because they made a lot of artistic choices that made you pay attention. Like, if only to think, wait, what's really happening here? Like, there's this one page where they're bouncing up, where Paige is talking to the boys, but like all of a sudden you see their feet and then their head and then and you're like, wait, I was like, are they on like a really elaborate seesaw? Like, what's happening? And then you pan back and you see they're on a trampoline, and I'm like, aha.
Yes, that was very good. The other thing is just reading these for the Book of the Month discussions. That's one of my favorite things about doing these Book of the Month with the Goodreads group, is that it makes me really slow down, because I'm the same way, where I tend to read the words and read the story and analyze maybe the same way that I think about things as I'm reading a book, and kind of divorce myself from the artistic components, just because I'm so much more used to reading the written word. And I really like that these discussions really make you kind of slow down and think about what the artist is doing, what is the letterer doing, and that kind of how everything fits together.
Definitely. I mean, as I've said, love this book to death. I will say, if you're going to read this book and you get it digitally, if you buy it on Comixology, don't read it in guided view. Absolutely, it is a sin to read this book in guided view.
Full page.
If only because, honestly, you read full page, read it. If you read it on Hoopla, go buy a physical copy of this book. You need to be able to see every single page constantly, like, because a lot of the actual context of what's being discussed and what's happening on the page happens in the art. Like, this is definitely one of those books where the art is telling the story as much, if not more, than the actual dialogue and captions. So if you read this, definitely, like, at least do full page open, or like if you read it on Hoopla, like, I don't know if they have like a panel view thing, but definitely make sure you're seeing the full page when you're reading this. Because I started reading this in guided view, and I was like, whoa, I'm missing so much context. Because when I first read it, I read it in hardcover, and I read it in my single issues and stuff. And I didn't remember it being so jarring, and I had to switch to full page view just to see everything. And that's definitely going to help. I'll just say that. But on the whole, I fucking love this book. This is the most beautiful comic I've read in like the last few years. I highly recommend it to pretty much anyone who wants to get into comics but doesn't want to read superhero books. Fuck Saga, fuck Walking Dead, fuck Why the Last Man.
We just lost half the listenership.
Listen, this is what I'm saying is, those books are great, but if you want something short and sweet, this is the perfect book to give people.
That's true. This would make an amazing Christmas present, because it is a one
Absolutely.
and done.
I mean, those other books are great. Like, don't get me wrong. Great comics out there. But if you need something short and sweet that's to the point, I recommend this one all the time, because it's a weird out there book that shows that comics are more than just capes. And it does such a great job telling the story with art and writing. And this, it's just such a well-crafted book. I can't get over it. That's me. I don't know. So to wrap up this show, let's do some credits, because this is the last episode of the year. Don't forget to take the survey. I'm going to remind you again, ircbpodcast.com/survey. But if you want to follow us through the end of the year, see what we're talking about comics and all that stuff, you can follow us all on Twitter. You can follow Kate at Kate Scotchlist. You can follow Kara at Kzam or Karazam. It's going to be in the show notes. You can follow me at Mike Rappin. You can follow the show at IRCB Podcast, where we retweet all sorts of comic things and respond to people. And I get in internet fights about what comic cred should be. I did that today.
Join us on our Goodreads group for weekly discussion threads. Right now, we've been talking about gaming and comics, because of the start of this book having that, and also Die Number 1 being really into gaming and comics. We're also right now asking for ideas for coming up with our 2019 Book of the Month theme schedule. So if you have any ideas of kind of themes you'd like, then we'd love to hear it. You can also find us at ircbpodcast.com, and the pronunciation guide and merch is up there as well. Rate and subscribe us to get us more listeners and better rankings, because Apple owns the world. And do you rate and subscribe on other services? I don't even know.
Oh, yeah, everywhere.
Okay.
You can rate and subscribe on pretty much any platform where we are, so go do that. And actually, you can listen to this show on your Amazon Alexa if you have one of those Echo things. You can just say, like, listen to I Read Comic Books, and I'm pretty sure we show up, and it'll just start playing the latest episode.
Ooh.
That's something that someone told me the other day.
That's banana pants.
Awesome. You can email us at ircb@destroythesybe.org, and you can subscribe on Patreon at patreon.com/IRCB podcast for exclusive audio and articles, early access to top of my pile posts, and more. I just wrote a thing for that, didn't I?
Yes, you did. And it was amazing.
Oh, thank you. Do Patreon backers have access to back matter content if it's been posted before they... All right.
Yeah, so we also post the show notes up there. If you want to see our raw show notes, you can also check out the Patreon and back us at a certain tier, and you'll get access to all of our show notes every week when the show goes up. Infinity Shred does all the music for our show. Best band in the universe, hands down. Thank you for letting us use your music, guys. You're the best. Xander, cool guy, extra cool editor.
Giver of germs. Typhoid Mary.
Of germs. He edits the show. He's fantastic. When it comes to editing, we'll just say that. I'll say thank you to Kara and Kate for being on the show this week. Kate, welcome back. I'm super excited to have you back on the show regularly.
Thank you very much.
Thank you to the listeners. Thank you to everyone who reaches out to us. A lot of people have been emailing and tweeting at us, and it warms my heart so much. Keep doing that. It's so awesome to interact with you guys. So until next time, read some great comics. I hope the last part of your year is fantastic, and we will see you in 2019.